Awesome. Hello, everybody. I know most of you in here probably already, but for those who don't know me, my name is Karen Stritzinger, and I'm, as Janie said, I'm going to be talking about cross-cultural game development and my experience with that personally. And to kick it off, I thought, why not do a little language learning? Does anyone here know any Korean by chance? Anybody on Duolingo? No? Oh. Okay, awesome. So no one's here to judge my my failure. Yeah, I'll talk more about why I'm doing this later in the presentation. But yeah, so if you want to say hello everyone, you say 여러분 안녕하세요. So hello everyone. My name is Karen. 제 이름은 Karen입니다. So I'm learning. Yeah, trying my best. So a little bit of my background just to give you some context on why I'm doing cross-cultural game development. So I went to Clemson in South Carolina, so neighbor state. And there's a really neat program there called Digital Production Arts, and they have a master's and an undergraduate program that you can do. So I did the Master of Fine Arts and learned all about animation and visual effects, 3D modeling, all that good stuff. And I thought that I would go to work at an animation studio when I graduated, and ended up instead going into the tech industry for 10 years, a little over that, and worked at a bunch of startups doing things like 3D clothing simulation and doing different software prototypes for new augmented reality headsets. There was another startup called Meta that's different from the Meta you know. So I actually worked at two separate companies called Meta. And most recently, the one more related to Oculus, I actually got to work on the Oculus system software. So when you put the headset on, the Quest headset, you see kind of that home environment. My team was responsible for designing the features in that space, and it was a lot of fun. So in 2022, I decided I wanted to see what I could do in terms of social and environmental impact with immersive media, and that's why I decided to start my own company called Hara Studios. And this is just a brief overview of the talk today, so there will be time at the end for questions if you have any, and feel free to raise your hand as we go too. If I say anything that doesn't make sense, we can try to clarify that. But I'll just do like a quick background on what do I mean by cross-cultural development, and some examples of that in practice, and then a case study showing a game that I'm working on and kind of the nitty-gritty details of that process, so you can see kind of what it looks like day to day. And yeah, also talk about cultural authenticity, and that's something that's really critical to do when you're working on these kinds of projects. So I tried to come up with a good summary of what cross-cultural game development is, and I like to think of it as projects that involve cultural exchange, and there's a lot of different ways that you can have that kind of cultural exchange. So it could be between the creator, they may be from one cultural background different from the audience. The creators themselves may be made up of different cultural backgrounds, and the audience may be made of different cultural backgrounds, and they might interact with each other in interesting ways. So you can have any combination of these, and the considerations you need to take into account as you design your game are definitely going to be different for each of those, but just try to capture the overall summary there. And some really great examples that I love. The first one I have to mention is Never Alone. Does anyone know the game Never Alone? Yeah, nice. So Never Alone is an incredible story. It's a game, kind of a platformer game about a girl and an Arctic fox, and it tells a lot of stories about indigenous folklore. And it was created by a studio called Upper One Games in partnership with Eline Media. And I first found out about this game actually at Games for Change, which is my favorite conference probably out there in the industry. And every time I go, I just have such a great time. And this is a photo I snapped at this talk that I keep coming back to over the years just as inspiration. The focus of the talk was, it was called Less Gloom, More Bloom, and it was all about the possibility of using games and storytelling to inspire kind of hopeful, aspirational, and achievable futures, kind of by showcasing what those worlds look like. But in that talk, Alan Gershenfeld talks about Never Alone and the making of that game and how they worked throughout that process to involve the indigenous community in the design and the development. And when I saw that, I just thought, like, this is how it's done, right? Like, that's something I aspire to achieve with my work, and it really kind of gave me the kind of just an outline of what was possible and structure for my own project. A few other games listed here are Venba. That one allows you to play as an Indian mother who immigrates to Canada in the 80s, I think. And I actually haven't played that one yet, but it shows a lot of cooking and the family culture through that experience. And it won a lot of awards, so I'm excited to check it out. And then there's Assassin's Creed Origins, which I wouldn't initially think of as a cross-cultural experience, but it's, you know, from one time period to another, it's showing us a culture that we would never be exposed to otherwise from thousands of years ago, instead of just from another place in the present day. So I think that's another interesting possibility for these projects, is to think about not just different locations, but different time periods. And there was actually a cross-cultural impact game jam hosted by Games for Change, and they have like a website and some videos you can look at for some smaller projects that were done by indie developers that might be good inspiration for you if you're trying to work on projects like this in the future. So working with games is already really difficult to start with, and doing it in a cross-cultural international collaboration is even more complex, and it's something that you really would have to consider. You know, why are we making our lives harder, you know, and what makes that worthwhile? And I think there's a lot of things that really make it worthwhile for me. And this is not an exhaustive list, but just a few of the benefits. You know, you can help increase empathy for cultural minorities. You can allow people to interact and support communities that they're just discovering. You can increase sensitivity for cultural differences and help reduce those misunderstandings that happen and hurtful interactions. And shifting people toward more of an open mindset instead of fear and hostility is something that we could use a lot more of and lately. And I think games are like a really powerful way of doing that. And also, I think they give you really great contextual language learning opportunities. And for my game, learning Korean is going to be part of that experience. So that's why on the first slide I shared a little of those phrases that I've been learning. And then just increasing meaningful connections across different cultural groups that might not normally interact with each other. I think that's something that just makes life worth living. So this is the game that my company is focused on right now. It's called Waves of Jeju Diving School. And it's a cozy simulation game where you get to train with an instructor. Her name is Yoonji. And you get to become what's called a haenyeo, a free diver on Jeju Island in Korea. And as part of this process, you get to bond with a cute school pet and learn about ocean stewardship and Korean folklore and all kinds of cultural artifacts and stories. So this whole project is involving a lot of cross-cultural collaboration. It's very distributed internationally. And I had to include some cute pictures of my dogs. So my spouse is from Seoul, and I learned over the years that Koreans love Jindo dogs. So Jindo is one of Koreans' it's one of the country's national treasures, and it's a protected breed. And so we ended up adopting 2 of these Jindo mix puppies from Jeju Island right before the pandemic hit and the whole lockdown happened. And yeah, they're really sweet, and they're very stubborn, like a lot of Korean dogs, but they're great, and they definitely gave us a lot of companionship, and it just got me thinking, like, what was it like, before we adopted them? What were their lives like, and what does this place Jeju Island look like? And I started doing some research and wondering, in the future, climate impacts are going to be worse. How would they survive? And what if I started prototyping a game to show the perspective of the dog and how they adapt? And the talk I showed earlier, the less gloom, more bloom, really inspired me to think about, what if, this isn't a dystopian world? We have plenty of that. What if instead we show how this dog finds a resilient community, and they find companionship, and they're able to adapt and really thrive? And, what if it's a hopeful story that gets people excited about the possibilities for the future, and really showcases what that looks like, allows players to have agency and learn about different climate solutions and things like that. So I thought, I'm going to explore this a little bit more, see if I can learn about Jeju Island, and I went down a rabbit hole for quite a while. I got every book I could on the topic, and when I was visiting Seoul for the first time, I actually found this little travel book in the bottom right about Jeju Island, and it's very small. It's only about this thick, and I just read from cover to cover on the plane ride home, and it just introduced me for the first time to the Haenyeo free divers. I had never heard of them before. I didn't know anything about it, and there was a whole section about how these women have been diving for hundreds of years. They don't use any breathing equipment, and it's a very risky job that they do. But the reason they don't use that equipment is so that they don't overharvest. So they're very mindful of keeping things in balance and being stewards of these ecosystems that they rely on for their livelihood. They collect shellfish and seaweed, and sadly, because of climate impacts, they're actually at risk of disappearing within the next decade or so. And they, because they've been doing this for hundreds of years, they've developed this really amazing traditional ecological knowledge that is, I think, critical to preserve, because just reading about it, I was just so inspired. And a lot of these women, they dive until they're in their 80s. They're still out there, and they just gave me hope. So I thought, the world needs to know about these women, and what better format than a game, and why not try to tell that story? But I am not Korean myself, so I am very mindful of, I initially felt like I shouldn't tell this story because that feels like cultural appropriation, and I just wasn't sure if kind of how to go about that process. So I shared the idea with Korean friends and family, and shared the game concepts with my Korean family and friends, and I was just shocked at how supportive they were. And they're like, you should definitely make this game. The Haenyeo is it's a very special part of Korean culture, and they were all excited about the possibility of a game showcasing that and bringing attention to it. So having their support, it made me think, okay, maybe I should do this and find a way to make the team representative of the community that we're showcasing. And that means that it needs to be led by Koreans and people from the Haenyeo diving community, and having them integrated in the process every step of the way. So I'll talk more about that later. But just to give you a little taste of these projects and the unique challenges that you might face. So as I mentioned before, I'm learning Korean. A few of us on the team are actually taking classes at Wake Tech. Does anyone here take classes there? Yeah, the Korean classes are amazing. So if you want to learn Korean, there's a really great instructor in all the classes. Most of the classes are virtual, so there's even students in Korea taking her classes. One of my teammates is in Texas, but I encouraged her to join the same class, and now we're in the same class together. So we're at level 3 now. So yeah, my goal is to become conversational so that I can communicate with the people on Jeju Island this summer, actually, when I go there to do some research, and want to be able to at least have basic interactions. But also, the trip is going to require hiring a lot of bilingual advisors and people who are supporting the project. So we've actually got a really great advisor who's based in Canada, and she's a Korean game developer as well. She has her own studio based in Toronto, and she's been amazing helping us kind of figure things out, and little tricky things like, you want to pay someone for helping give you feedback on a pitch deck or something like that, but it might be considered rude in certain cultural contexts, and it might be better to give a gift instead. So things like that, navigating that is tricky, and having these advisors has been really critical for me. And all kinds of little things, like I use this translator tool called Papago. Has anyone used Papago? It's much better for Korean compared to Google Translate, so I've been using that just almost daily to translate emails and all kinds of things. And one of the unexpected challenges that I wouldn't have anticipated is grant funding is tricky for international projects, because a lot of times they actually require social impact projects to have their impact be in the US, and because this project is mostly focused on the Korean culture, it's really hard sometimes to meet those criteria. So, and then you run into the same issue with funding from Korea. I'm not a Korean company, so have even talked about with my advisor, maybe I should set up a legal entity in Korea to navigate that. So all kinds of tricky things, but it's the project has yeah, we can't finish this talk without talking about taxes, but yeah, I'm glad I got a good laugh without even saying anything. And it's tax time, so I know I'm sorry to stress you out. But yeah, I never thought I would have to read tax treaties as part of my job, but I ended up having to do that and getting really confused and realizing I desperately needed to hire someone who knows what they're doing. And actually at ECGC a couple years ago, there's a really amazing talk, and I found out about Rachel Presser. She's a consultant specifically for game developers and taxes and all the international complexity that you have to deal with for these projects that are global. And she wrote this book that I don't know how she managed to do it, but reading it, like, it made me laugh, and it's about taxes. So that's a special skill, and you can actually get a free copy of it on her website. It's called sonictoad.com. So I highly recommend that. If you're even thinking about doing a project like this, it'll give you some peace of mind. And you can actually get, I think, a more updated version of that on Amazon, just searching for that name, and help support the creator. And the last thing I'll mention is that we ended up having to use some digital platforms like Wise to send payments to contractors, and it's a little tricky finding the right platform to use because they don't support every currency in every country, so I had to kind of do some digging to figure out what worked for Korea and Canada specifically in my case. But yeah, Wise is good if you're working with people in those countries. So here's a fun little map of all the people on our team that are spread out. So somehow we managed to get like pretty good coverage in North America and also Korea. And yeah, as I mentioned before, like we're trying to build this team to represent the Haenyeo community as well as possible. So currently 50% of the design and development team has Korean heritage, and then there's 2 additional team members, including myself, who married into Korean families, so we're, maybe honorary Koreans. I don't know if I qualify, but yeah. I'm working at least on the Duolingo, so hope I get a few points. But yeah, I mentioned to some people I'm very excited to be planning a trip to Jeju Island, actually applying to a diving school there, and fingers crossed. It's pretty competitive, I hear. But yeah, if I manage to get into that, I'm going to be doing like a dev blog and showcasing the process of working there and learning about diving. A little bit nervous because it's kind of dangerous, like you could die. But it's it's a serious job, and it's a difficult job, and these women deserve a lot of respect, and I think having to go through that process would really make the game a lot better. So really hoping that works out. And this is just a glimpse of the tools that we use in our process to work with our partner game studio, which is Cosdots. They're located in Seoul. And I actually found them, I was looking for games about Jeju Island, and they had already created one. And I thought they did an amazing job of telling the story of Jeju Island and the history and the culture there. So I just thought, hey, maybe I'll email them and see if they respond. And they did, almost instantly. So you never know with those cold emails whether things will work out. But in this case, their team was great. It's a very small team of 2, and they've helped create the character designs, props, and environment art for our final assets. And they actually just finished that a couple days ago. So we're really excited to be working with them. And I mentioned before, my other advisor in Canada, she has her own company called Core Meta Inc. and makes actually VR games that teach Korean language in an immersive format. So really love the work that they're doing, and they've been just incredible to give us input on how to communicate and collaborate with partners on Jeju Island. And I had to show some of the beautiful art that Cosdots helped create. So they did these character designs. These are our main characters for the game. This is your diving instructor. Her name's Yunji. This is Ollie. And yeah, he's a pure Jindo. That's why he's white. You might notice my dogs are not pure white. They're mutts or mongrels, as it said on their immigration form. But yeah, I thought, we gotta include the pure Jindo for cultural awareness globally. Gotta spread news about Jindos. Yeah, that's some of the environment designs. And throughout this whole process, it's obviously super important to get feedback and do a lot of play testing, and that goes for any game, but especially for something that's culturally sensitive, where you need to make sure you're doing things in a respectful way and that the community feels that it's representing things authentically. So we did a whole tour last year around more places than I initially planned on. So we went to GDC last year and did some demos, met some really amazing people who ended up becoming collaborators on the project. And here's Oak City Indie Games, where we got a lot of great feedback just from the local community. And one of my highlights was at South by Southwest. We were really lucky to get featured there by the Just Play Game Jam. It's a really amazing game jam. And they were so nice to give us like a whole booth for free for the VR demo. So we went out there to try to take advantage of that and gather as much feedback as we could. And it just so happened that that booth was right next to the Korea pavilion. So we made some really good friends there, and here is my friend Ray. He gave us so much great feedback, and just like, it made me want to cry just seeing his reaction and the emotions that the people had, seeing that their culture is reflected in a game. It made me realize, like, this is actually really important to keep doing and to find a way to make it happen. And on days when I'm not sure if it's going to work out, I just remember those things. And yeah, it's been quite a journey so far, and actually somehow we managed to end up at the United Nations last fall, and that was crazy. Like, I never expected to get to set foot in that building, but Games for Change had one of their arcades set up, and we had a booth there, and I got to be on a panel and talk about the game, so that was crazy. But this is just a slide showing we are trying to be strategic about the social impact and make sure we're measuring kind of what sort of maybe player behavior change might result from experiencing this content. And we're going to design it with the goal to be as authentic as possible and try our best to help preserve this Henyo culture, because it is at risk of disappearing. And we wanted to donate part of the profit from the game directly to the Jeju Henyo community and support the work that they're doing, whether it's at the diving school that I mentioned or some of the other nonprofit organizations there. We're going to try to work really closely with them and figure out kind of what their needs are. And then ideally exhibit the game at schools and museums in Korea and the US and help make things a bit more accessible, because not everyone can afford these VR headsets. And we're also planning to make a PC version of the game for that same reason. And lastly, we want to add some assets to the Unity store because there's not enough Korean assets. So yeah, that's our strategy. And thank you. 감사합니다. Any questions? 질문 있어요? Anybody?
Can you go back to the slide with your dogs? I missed it.
Yes. I will always go back to that slide.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's Chewy and Peach. Yeah, they're very sweet.
Have you play tested this game with dogs?
I thought about it, actually. Not yet, though. We'll have to try that. Yes.
At one point, this is just a note, at one point there was a lab at NC State. I don't know if they're still doing this, but they were doing like canine machine interfaces.
Mm. I didn't hear about that. That's really neat. Might have to talk to them. Canine interfaces.
It's not so much on the cultural side, but what would you kind of consider are your bottlenecks for developing like VR, or I guess globally at that point, kind of the things that would slow you down as a team?
There's so many things. Where do I start? I think a lot of it is even just like finding people who have the headset to play test is hard. And once they have a play test, convincing them to take the time to install it and actually play the game is harder than you would think. But yeah, I guess that's a challenge that any project would have. But yeah, I think the hard part is also like getting fresh feedback from people who've never seen it, because the game has iterated so much at this point. And like it started out, we were actually developing the game initially to where you can play as the dog and the human, which is very ambitious. And then recently we decided to scope it down for the initial version to just focus on the diving part and interacting as the human character. So you still get to pet the dog, but we might have to wait until we get more funding to make the next game where you get to play as both characters, and that's just a trade-off we had to make to work with the funding that we have now. Yeah. Anything else?
heard of Choco Chat?
Choco what?
Choco Chat?
No.
Oh, okay.
What's that?
I was working with a software company that like started getting more popular in Korea before like other places, and they use this app called Choco
Oh,
Chat.
is it Kakao? Is
Huh?
that Kakao? That's the one I know of that
It might be
Koreans use.
that.
Yeah. You might hear it. I mean, it sounds like
I think maybe someone
chocolatey.
just called it that. Maybe I just called it that.
I can see how you would swap those two. Yeah. Yeah, Kakao is like the default mode of communication for Koreans, I've
So
discovered.
you do use it.
Yeah.
Another question, is there any sort of like playable demo?
There is. I'm glad you asked. And I think, yeah, actually I had a little bit of a link on the last slide for you, but it's just wavesofjeju.com if you already have a headset, and if not, I have my headset here with me, and if anyone would like to try it, you're welcome to check out the latest prototype.
I think the last time I tried it, I was the dog, and I was really sad when you said you can't be the dog anymore.
I know, everyone loves being the dog. It's so hard. Yeah, that might be the most challenging thing is realizing, like, I think that in terms of the cultural preservation, you can't really have that with just
Right.
the dog. So if we had to pick one to start, it had to be the diver. But
Right.
the dog, it's going to happen.
That makes
It's-
sense.
Too many people shared that same feedback, so
Yeah.
just gotta find a way to get the funding. Yeah.
If no one else has questions, I have a few questions about the research aspect of cross-cultural collaboration, because there's a lot of things that I'm thinking immediately as someone who like also goes into deep research dives, especially when doing genealogy stuff. We're not getting into that. That's a talk for another out of office meetup. Go to the next out of office meetup all of you. It's all first. So it's worth it. So the first question I had was, where did you decide, like, okay, the research needs to end and I need to actually start making the thing? Like, did you like feel like you had a good foundation of the research, or did you feel like, no, I'm gonna make the prototype and fit the research around the prototype? Just kind of like getting an idea of that
Yeah, that's
process.
a good question. At least for me, other people might have a different process, but my research process never really stops. It's just like constantly evolving, you know? And like, I feel like the more time I spend with the project, I discover more things, and that's the fun part, I think, is like I'm learning so much about Korea, and I think it's given me a lot of ideas about little details to add to the game, so I don't feel like I have to stop that process. And if anything, like, we're doing more research than we were in the beginning, because we're going to be going there and in person and trying to see what it really feels like to be there, and what it's like to be underwater and to have to hold your breath, you know, for sometimes they hold their breath for up to 2 minutes, which I don't think I can do, but probably be closer to 45 seconds. But it's, you know, what does it feel like when a sea turtle swims by, or, you know, a dolphin, and when you collect a certain type of shellfish for the first time, and I don't know, yeah, gotta figure all those things out. Yeah.
Anyone else has a question?
Just basics, like, you know, planned release date, and yeah, if you have an idea of that yet.
So definitely not set in stone, at least not until we get some funding figured out. But I think my goal is to, by the end of this year, and really later next year, probably have like the early access version for the MetaQuest. And this year I'm trying to get like an alpha version for playtesters, and some people here will get access to that. But yeah, I want to keep the timeline as short as I can, because it's the Henyo culture is an urgent issue, I think, to preserve that in the short term.
I wanted to know how you kind of came to the conclusion and kind of where it is at right now on the cultural context that the player character has.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Do you, by cultural context, could you elaborate more on kind of what you're...
Like, I'm kind of curious about where, like, who the player character is, where they're coming from, what context that they have coming into diving school, and their connection with the culture.
Yeah, so that was kind of, I think maybe 6 month to a year process of building this story in the world, kind of through the research process and the characters and their backgrounds. I tried to think about, what if this game is set in the present day, how old is this character, and how old would they be if the next game is set in the early 2050s, and how does their life experience change them from those points? Oh, I'm sorry. Close call. How does that character change over the long term? And we actually kind of went backwards. We developed the story and the character for early 2050s time frame, where she's 75 years old, and then realized, hey, I want to actually start the story in the present day, while there still are some fish in this ecosystem to catch, and to show kind of the early beginnings of the ecosystem restoration process that these divers are working on. And this character, Yoonji, is going to be about 45 years old at that time point. And she is going to be the leader of the diving school to kind of guide you as you go through your lessons. But, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I was more wondering, the player character, is the player character affiliated with the culture that you're going to be exhibiting at all, or if they're kind of like an outsider in.
The player character, the main character?
When the player plays, how are you, I'm curious about how you're planning on sort of exhibiting the culture.
The storyline for the player themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, the player, so you're attending the diving school, and Yoonji is your instructor, but you recently quit your corporate job, and you are, maybe in a midlife crisis, and you want to do anything but sit in an office. So if that's the mindset you're in, then this is going to be the perfect game for you. Yeah. So yeah, that is that kind of what you were asking? Okay, yeah, sorry.
Like Stardew Valley, right?
Kind of. Actually, Stardew Valley was part of my inspiration, because I thought, what is it about Stardew Valley that makes everyone just feel warm and fuzzy? And it's that feeling of yeah, I'm quitting my job. I'm gonna go back to nature and not do what I'm supposed to do. Not do what society tells you have to do, and just be more present in the real world and nature, and really connect to that. I think that's something a lot of people right now find very appealing.
Any other questions from anyone? Well, thank you very much, Karen.